For our radio listeners, we managed to cut to a picture there of Scahill dragging Richie Power up by the jersey. That's what he might have got booked for, and it might not have been a case of mistaken identity. Tommy Walsh, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. How are you?
The dark arts. You were never involved in any of that stuff.
Well, I used to call them the dark arts. I just call them the arts, Ger. Sure. Yeah, listen, it was a different game back then. Like it was almost slowing down before maybe that second or two before the ball came in. And if you were trying to do that to him, then sure, listen, you might have had an advantage. But as Paul said, now like them days are gone because there's too many cameras around, and you're gone to the line. It's like soccer. You can't slide tackle in the Premier League anymore because, you know, if you're off that by that 1 second, VAR is in and you're probably off. And it's the same with hurling, but it was the culture that was grew up in. Like, you don't look to the referee for support. You look after yourself. And it's the same with a forward. Forward came in and, as Paul was saying, you know, hit you a shot there just to get to know you. You just took it and you got on with it. Like, and it was part of the game. You did it in the garden when you're home to your brothers and sisters and that. Like, so you expected no different than championship days. And they were enjoyable to the most part as well, Ger, because when you're getting into these battles with guys, it was like you expected out of him, he expected out of you, and no one got hurt. That's the main thing. Like, there was you weren't trying to hurt anybody or anything like that. It was just, you know, maybe could be anything really, but yeah, the arts. That's what I used to call them anyway.
The bit of shirt pulling that they're talking about in GAA, obviously, I think it wasn't invented by James McCartan, but he used to run out and he'd pull the defender's jersey behind him as he was going. He'd trip over, and the referee would be like, "Oh, you've been fouled there as a corner forward." I remember Diarmuid Ling telling us one time about going for a high ball with you, and your hand was on his hurl the whole time until the very last second, and all of a sudden the ball was in your hand. I was like, the sleight of hand that none of us knew about, but Diarmuid was like, "That was genius."
Yeah, well, it wasn't like basically the way I suppose most players play the game when the ball is in the sky, Jerry, is if you're on your own, the ball comes down, you catch it, you know, 100% of the time. If there's somebody on you and they're in front of you, you don't catch it. It's usually because there was something in the way, whether that was his hurl, whether that was his hand or whatever. So you just had to kind of free the path so that the ball came straight into your hand. That's the way, really, like when it really boils down. If you look at anybody trying to catch a ball, whether they're a forward or a back, like it's all about making sure that you know, pathway for the ball is coming straight into your hand, because otherwise it hits their hurl, hits their hand straight down into the ground. But like, I wouldn't, you know, like that's a skill in the game. Like I'm not talking about hitting the person or striking their hurl or striking their hand. I'm just talking about positioning everything in a way that the ball comes straight into your hand instead of his, you know. So you can call it the dark arts if you want. I definitely wouldn't look at it like that, because if I was in front of my man and I went up to catch it and he shoved, you know, my hurl, my hand out of the way so the ball went into his hand, I'd say fair play to him, and I'd say very silly out of me to put myself in that position, you know.
Would you be talking to before throw-in when the forward is coming over and you're shaking hands, would you be talking throughout the match, whispering to him, saying things in his ear, getting in his head, or is that not a done thing?
Yeah, that was never a done thing in hurling, to answer. It's too fast, because if you're saying that to your man and suddenly, like, it's all he has to do is get the ball and put in the back of the net, and suddenly, like, you're the fool. So I always found it too high risk. Like, plus you knew the guys. There was only 5 or 6 Kilkenny, say Tipperary, Cork, Galway, you know, Limerick. There's only so many teams at the top anyway, so you knew them all pretty well. And I never saw an advantage to it anyway, because a forward could just go past you. You know, you could be marking him, like as Christy Ring used to say, like as a forward, you could be out of the game for 55 minutes, in a 60-minute game back then. You could be out of the game for 55 minutes. You only have to hurl well for 5 minutes. And you know, you're the hero. Towards the defender then is, you know, in big trouble. Like, he scored 3 goals. I think he was on Donald Broderick for Limerick in, say it was a Munster final many moons ago, and Christie was out of the game for the whole game. Next minute scored 3 goals and Cork beat Limerick. So I never saw an advantage to talking to someone, Shane. It's just, and it wasn't the done thing too. Like, you're geared by your environment as well. You're probably brought up to respect your opponent and it was all kind of, everybody gives everything to win the game, and you forget about it then once the game is over. So if there's words spoken, it's very hard to totally forget about then after the game, isn't it? Now, the usual stuff probably happened from time to time with certain players that you wouldn't hold it against them. They might be saying this, and Brian Cody's looking at you there, you could be coming off there in the next few minutes, or that kind of it's harmless enough out talk, but there was never anything like that you would hear of that went on in other sports. There really wasn't, Shane. And I definitely think they used to have all-star tours back then. Used to have railway cups. Railway cups were magical as a player, probably not as a spectator, because not everybody was playing during the depths of the winter. But you really got to know players, like especially in Leinster, you got to know the Offaly lads, the Wexford lads, and it was great for camaraderie, because when you're playing with each other in a railway cup, you were on the same team. Towards after a game, if it's Kilkenny versus Wexford, or Kilkenny versus Offaly, if you win, you don't want to kind of rub it in the person's face, and if you lose, you're in no mood to talk to anyone, Shane. So I think that them kind of competitions and the All-Star tours and things like that, I think they cut out a lot of that as well, because you knew the guys,
Before we get to the league final, I did want to just ask your opinion on a conversation that's been had over the last week or so about just how enjoyable the game is at the moment, with the frequency of scoring and the high scores. Where do you stand on the quality of the game generally that we're watching at the moment? Yeah,
well, there's nothing wrong with the quality, Ger. I think it's the excitement people are referring to. So before, say when the scores were averaging maybe 111 to 115, them kind of scores would have been very, very common, say probably 15, 20 years ago. But you had so many different exciting parts of the game other than the score. So say if the ball came into the full back line and Brian Lohan or Noel Hickey, or we'll say Kevin Keenan from Offaly, The Rock from Cork, these guys come out with a ball, the whole crowd is on their feet to see him out in front. Next minute they collect it, they might, shoulder lad and then drive it 100 yards down the line. The crowd are going wild as if it's a goal. Suddenly then, if you forward on that play, it goes down, and it could be a man-on-man battle inside. It could be, we'll say, Eddie Brennan versus Wayne Sherlock, or it could be Joe Dean versus Kevin Keenan, it could be Anton, and suddenly the crowd are on their feet again. What happens if the ball breaks a certain way? What if he catches it, the forward catches it, turns his man? Again, if there's a big catch, the crowd are on their feet again. So I think it's towards now, when you get the ball in the fence, you do a 5-yard stick pass. There's no buzz or excitement around that. When you get the ball in the forwards, generally like you're kind of 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3. No real excitement if the ball breaks a certain way, because the spare man is picking it up. So I think the quality, there's no difference. The quality is probably higher than it ever was. Like, would you go ask me to take a puck out from 50,000 people? Well, that's steamrolling down behind me in Crow Park. Very difficult thing to do it with their eyes shut at the moment. A stick pass from 30-40 yards straight into a lad's hand, like I'd say 50% of our ones would have been straight at a man's feet. So I think there's no drop off, and there's probably definitely a higher skill level, absolutely, at the moment. I think the reference at the moment is the excitement of the game has definitely changed.
And do you lament that? Do you miss that, or do you think that this is just part of more teams will get closer to each other, and we're in a cycle where there's one dominant team? And I think if you didn't have Limerick dominating, just take Limerick out over the last 4 or 5 years, anybody would have felt like they could win the All-Ireland, and we wouldn't have had too many of the one-sided games. Is that part of this conversation as well? Because it feels a little bit like we had this conversation when the Dubs were mechanically hoovering up All-Irelands. People changed the game, they changed the kick-out rule, everything was wrong, they got the forward mark, when actually that was just an all-time great team, and you didn't really need to change the rules.
Yeah, I suppose I tend not to look at the positive side of it, because it happened in football years ago and everybody was giving out about it. Did it help? I don't think it did. So there's no advantage to us coming on week complaining about the way it was and the way it should have been. I don't think it helps in any way towards encouraging people to play the game, to watch the game. I think there will be a natural evolution. I was looking at the styles that have happened over the last, we'll say, 30 years. You go back to Clare, they brought in physical fitness in the mid-90s that was probably never seen in hurling before, running up mountains. It wasn't their Clare players on behind trees, so they didn't have to do the chine in the next run, miss the hill running. Huge. They brought this physical fitness. Next minute Kilkenny came along, they brought, had to I suppose adapt and join with Clare and that, and they brought this spirit and intensity that forwards were working like never before. Never seen corner forwards. Their job was to score. Full forwards, their job is to score goals. Now they're running back to midfield, running back to half-back line, hooking and blocking. You had a Tipperary team then that beat, the Kilkenny team going for the 5 in a row. That Tipperary team was all about movement. Eamon O'Shea came in with his, different slant on the way he thought the game should be played. Next minute, you couldn't stay in your position. You're watching forwards, they're moving absolutely everywhere, and there were lads giving them the ball. Beforehand, when you got the ball in the backs, you just cleared as long as you could hit it. Now they were finding forwards in great positions. Suddenly, Tipperary scored goal after goal. You had the Cork running game. Like that Cork running game, I remember in 06, they're after winning 2 in a row. We were after sticking to our guns because, Brian Cody was so tough. He was so determined, so confident in his own ability to read the game. He said, no, we're doing it our way and we'll stay going. And, I'm sure at the time, Cork were like Tom and Jerry midfield, Tom Kenny, Jerry O'Connor, speed merchants. You couldn't catch them. They were soaring up and down the field for 70 minutes. You had Ben O'Connor, you had Niall McCarthy scoring all these scores as a result of the running game. They run out from the back, and the question was then, should we go and change? Should you adapt? That maybe our time is finished with the way we play the game. But no, they stuck with it, and suddenly the running game was kind of gone. And then you had, in recent times, I suppose, Galway did a bit of movement after they scored. Say if Joe Canning was playing wing forward, he scored, he'd move on to the next position, which would be corner forward. And the whole Galway forwarding rotated around that way. And now, sure, as we see, Ger, we have the Limerick game, which has been so dominant for the last, since probably, I know they won it in 18, but their probably current game has probably only been as dominant since 2020, where it's stick passing everywhere. And the stick passing quality is just off the charts. And I think that's where a lot of other teams are failing, really, because they're not able to, they're trying to do the Limerick game, but just not able to do it as well. And, so I think there'll be a natural evolution of the game, and that's when it'll change. But you'd love to know what they want to come up with.
Well, I was going to say, I think the lesson from that, you've just given us a brilliant potted history lesson there. Nobody ever got to the top by copying what was already being done. Everybody had to do something slightly different and closer to their own identity based on their own resources, which leads me nicely to the final here about where Kilkenny are. Kilkenny seem to have managed to manage the transition from an all-time great to a disciple, and yet be slightly different. So it's not exactly just a continuation. Derek Lyng seems to be his own man, and the team's there's subtle enough changes, but are there enough changes, do you think, for us to say that actually you can say there's a difference between Kilkenny this year and last year?
Well, there's new players in there. You have Billy Drennan is in there. He's having a fantastic league campaign. He's an All-Ireland champion in handball. You have Garo O'Donnell is coming in and making great impacts off the bench. Scored a hat-trick against Tipperary in the Dillon challenge game there to raise funds. So, like, they are adding players to the panel to this. They have a few position switches, like Hugh Lawler seems to be being tried out around the half back line. Young Tommy Walsh is tried out around the half back line. Parg has gone back inside. So there has been plenty of change, slight changes, as you said, Ger. So yeah, Kilkenny would be very confident, but I think it all binds down to the fact of the strength of this Limerick team. Their physical strength is such a huge asset to them. And we saw Tipperary the last day. They tried to take him on with just going at him through the physical side. And I don't think it's the way to go at this Limerick team. I think you have to go at them with movement and speed, because taking on guys that are 6'5", 6'7", like Limerick have 3 or 4 lads 6'5", and they probably have 8 or 9 lads 6'2", 6'3" and above. So I think taking them on with the physical game, there's only going to be one winner, and that's Limerick, because they'll be able to take the hits better than anybody else. When they go through the tackles, they'll go through more tackles than anybody else. That's just science. That's just the way it is. So I think you have to take them on with movement, and you have to take them on with speed. Speed is a huge thing. When you're strong, what do you want the opposition to do? Take you on with strength. What do you not want them to do? Take you on with speed. So with Kilkenny, you have, Owen Cody there, you have Billy Drennan, all these boys, absolutely fast as lightning. And I'm not just talking about their feet, their heads. Hurling is a class game. It's all about class. You could score 2 or 3 goals in the space of a minute if your head is switched on and if your feet are switched on. So I think taking on Limerick in this league final, I would not take them on just going, it's with the physical side of things. I take them on the other side, and you need to score goals. This Limerick team has been brilliant in recent times about not conceding goals. They need to take them on and score a few goals, and keep them, I suppose, short on the other side regards, keep them out of away from the goalkeeper.
Yeah, these two sides produced a classic in the All-Ireland final last year, and the hope is that they'll produce a classic again and we can start talking about an exciting match. What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to win?
Yeah, so I do think Limerick are going to win. I just think they're after keeping very fresh during the league. Although they're winning every match and winning comfortably enough in the end, they're leaving off 3 or 4 of their big shots. I reckon they'll go with I reckon the two of them will go with nearly championship type teams this weekend. And I do think Limerick will win. But I'm excited to see where Kilkenny at now. As we said, they have a few position switches now. They're going to be able to take on maybe. I always see that Limerick half-hour line is Gerard Hegarty and Tom Morrissey, Keane Lynch. They're just stars, and they're just brilliant in every game. 2 out of the 3 of them are nearly man of the match in every single game. They're left with acres and acres of space there. So I'd love to see the Kilkenny team cutting out, as in man-mark them guys, and see what happens then on the other side, because everybody has tried it, maybe the zonal thing against them, where they leave off Gerard when he goes out the field, they leave off Keane, they leave off Tom Morrissey. The result every time is one or two of them scoring 5 points, scoring 2, 3, scoring 7 points. So I'd love them to man-mark the half-hour line and the half-back line, because although they're very strong on one side, the half-back line of Hannon, Burns and Kyle Hayes, they're commonly coming up with probably 6 points plus, and that's probably not even just from frees. So I'd be man-marking the half-back line and the half-hour line and seeing where that'll take you.
Well, we'll find out on Sunday. Good stuff, Tommy. Thanks a million for joining us. Great to have you back. Cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
Tommy Walsh giving us some thoughts there on the weekend's hurling.